Hey guys, Brandon Woolham, and today we are hanging out with the Grammy-winning Gospel Hall of Famer Russ Taff. How are you, my man?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Home for a while and just enjoyed the holidays and got a few more weeks off before I take off again.
Yeah, but you don't really get a full-on break while you're at home because it's a busy few weeks for you. We talked today about the new album getting ready to drop, Cover Story. The title
Yeah,
there kind of hints at what we can expect. Going to see some
right.
covers from Bob Dylan, U2,
Yep.
Prince, Simon and Garfunkel, and some others there.
Yeah.
Where the idea come to do this type of album?
Well, it started with Steve Taylor and I and John Painter, who produced the record, just sitting down and begin to brainstorm what kind of record we want to make, what do we want to say, and we begin to focus on my journey and the things that led me, describe parts of my life where I was, and songs just became. We threw a whole bunch on the table. Then we just kind of began to eliminate, and each song uh, describes a part of this long journey that I've been on in recovery and getting to know the Jesus that liked me and a lot of things like that. So the record was born out of all of that.
Not only is kind of the music a little different on this album, but kind of how the album was funded is different for you this time too. Of all the albums you put out, this one here kind of crowdsourced. You had a Kickstarter for this one.
Yeah, we did. It was a um, of course, coming up with the title cover story was just uh, um, I don't know, like I just said, it described in each song. I tell you, there were times I would just tear up in the studio because just remembering places where I was and places how God stepped in. But we the Kickstarter was Steve Taylor's idea. There was funding. There were several people that stepped forward and said it's time for you to make a record, and they funded actually the making of the record, and gave us a really good healthy budget. But we didn't have any money to market it. So Steve Taylor had this wonderful idea because with his movies and stuff like that, he understands Kickstarters. I've never asked for money in my life, and growing up in the age of these TV preachers that are always asking for money. So Steve said, I know how to do it. Let me do it. You just sit beside me and say one word. So that's what he did. But we raised a lot of money. People over the years that have been touched by the songs, touched by the ministry, touched by the concerts and the documentary, um, just began to give and say, we want to help you make this record. And I was just absolutely overwhelmed. But just having Steve Taylor involved with this, he's one of the most talented, creative people I've ever met in my life. And so it was just a joy to work with him and see how his brain works and the just the melding of our brains. And then what began to come out of that was just, I don't know, it's one of my favorite records. It really, really is one of my favorite records.
Yeah, there's so many songs out there over these years that kind of connect with your story. So how did you narrow it down to this list of covers that made the cut for the album?
Well, it is as we looked at each song and Russ, where would this song fit in your story? And each song I could sit down and describe to you where I was, when I was, and what that song did for me, and to explain this journey that I've been on of redemption. So I don't know, each song as we kind of go through the list of some of these things, um, I don't know. Yeah, some of these songs just take me right back to where I was at the lowest point in my life. And I mean, like the sound of silence. And my Lord, man, I remember that part of my life and how sad it was. But then you have songs like my mother, all we had for entertainment. We were raised in this little Pentecostal church, about 20 people, and we were all just kind of waiting for Jesus to come back, and no newspapers, no magazines, no radio. Um, and so all we had for entertainment was Mama's record collection. And she loved black and white gospel. So her favorite singer was Mahalia Jackson and Vestal Goodman. So I grew up with both of those voices in my ear. But she had an album by Blind Willie Johnson that was came out I think in the 50s, and he had this song "Tear This Building Down," and that was the first time to hear it when I was like, I don't know, 9 years old. And that song, there's been other people that cut it, but I've always wanted to cut this song. Um, so I don't know. That was one of the hardest because I never sang that many words that fast. It was almost like a rapper, you know. But to start the record with that is just fun. And I don't know, if I had my way, I'd tear this building down. And people have interpreted different ways, but for me, it was like this house that I had built on sand. And if I had my way, I would tear it down, and thank God I was able to. But the record just starts out fun with that, and so then we go into Grandma's Hands. Is it okay if I just list some songs, or do you want to
Let's
stop me
do
and
it.
jump in here? Okay. Well, we go into Grandma's Hands, and it was a Bill Withers song. But my grandmother was the only sane part of my life till I was 12. And, you can't talk outside the family. You just can't talk outside the family. But my grandmother knew what was going on in our home, and I could go talk with her. And she was always that same voice of reason. Son, it's going to be okay. God's going to take care of you. And to just really let this 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old boy just sit with somebody that would tell you that knew what was going on inside the home, but would just tell you that it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. So my grandmother was that such an important. And when I heard Bill Withers do it, well, immediately years ago, I just went back to um, my own grandmother and to honor her. And we changed the lyric around some to where it would fit my story more. But I don't know. I love that song. It makes me remember the woman that helped shape my childhood in a very positive way.
Yeah, we've got to hear a few of these songs, at least teasers of them the past few months. Is there one that you're really looking forward to getting out there and people hearing your version of this song?
Oh man, shoot, Brandon. Man, I made a list of Lord. Man, I'm just having to sit here and pick. There are several, but just as far as fun, um, I've always loved that the Bob Dylan tune, "I Believe in You," and also the U2 and BB King, "When Love Comes to Town." I've always just loved that song, and so we did kind of our version of it, but. Man, people are people. I'm just sitting here, but in the Prince song, "The Cross," I mean, I've always loved that song, and it is such a different, beautiful picture of the cross. And when Steve brought me that, I'd heard it years ago, and I don't know, to have a song that comes from a pregnant mother, um, sadness and destruction, and what the cross means. Uh, I don't know. It was such a powerful story for me, but I could go on and on. I'll let you just stop me there and pick what you want. You know
I
your audience.
haven't got to hear them yet. I still got to wait a couple
Okay. Oh
weeks.
man. Shoot. I'm sorry. Should have sent you the record.
Oh, it's all
Man.
good. So the gospel community, they've been familiar with the story of yours for years, but these past couple of years, really, a lot of people outside the Christian community have been kind of getting into the Russ Taff story. Is there hope that these songs that people are familiar with, maybe outside of Christian music, will get them to go back and look up your testimony?
Well, I when I toured with a man called Andre Crouch in Europe, who's just a legend, if people don't know him. But back, it was the late 80s and early 90s. We did 2 tours of Europe together. And back then, there was no churches big enough to hold us. So we would hook the tour on festivals, but you have the band and everything else. So you got to work through the week. And the only place big enough to hold us was clubs, big clubs. And um, it was a different. I'd never been in a club before. It was, I mean, in the sense of like, my mother was terrified demons were going to jump on me, but I saw the power of a lyric, and I mean, doing songs like "I Still Believe" in a club setting like that, to where you began to see lyrics and what is Christianese and what is a lyric that can reach everybody, and that began to shape my writing. And I don't know, the clubs we played across Europe, and back then it was like, if you're good, you're good. If you're bad, you're bad. Just come in and play. And we both had Grammys, so they opened the doors to us. But I saw God show up. I remember one club. It was called, and it's about the only one I truly, truly remember. There were a lot of them, but it was called the Metropole in Helsinki, Finland. And I was out there, and I was doing Rock Solid and I Still Believe and stuff like that. And then I don't think they introduced Andre that night. And he slipped out on the piano by himself. And I've been in church where I felt the presence of the Lord. You have too, those just special moments where you just feel him just kind of come down and kind of move in the room a little bit. And by himself, he began to sing, "Jesus is the answer. For the world today, above him, there's no other." We never really preached or testimony, anything like that. People there to hear music. But there was a presence that came down in that room. I mean, to the point, it's like I got goosebumps. I was like, "Oh, Jesus, oh, Jesus, oh, Jesus." And I felt his presence just move into that room of people that are searching, looking, they're discontent, they're unsatisfied, and a lot of them were upset with the church because they were told they were doing wrong, everything they did. But I felt his presence just come down in that room. And now when I go to Europe, I always ask promoters, just let me sing in one club. It keeps me honest. It just really keeps me honest. So putting this record together, we were trying to reach outside the Christian community to where, it's being pitched to Americana stations, and we've sent them 2 singles so far, and they've done pretty well. But I don't know. A couple of weeks ago, I was contacted by a band in Norway, and they've asked me to come over this summer and do the record live with them. They're a great band. I've used them before and tour Norway and Sweden, just doing cover story. So there's things like that that's starting to happen. But my desire, and you never know, you never know. You just follow your heart and do the best you can. But is to go beyond that marketplace, that where people that are hungry, people that are searching, people that are discontent, and to reach them with some of these songs that, to me, I don't know, they haven't been heard since the 80s. So I mean, like Duran Duran and Depeche Mode, some of their tunes, and but we'll see. We've just started this thing, and the record doesn't come out till, I think, the end of this month, January 31st, I think is a release date. And we've been having some trouble getting vinyl companies to print. They're just such in high demand. And it's funny because Steve Taylor has been in charge of all this, and he finally found one here in Nashville. And so we got to work on it, and everything was looking good. And they had me sign like 520 of the big LP jackets,
Mm-hmm.
And then the company folds. So Steve is scrambling, trying to find another pressing company. I think he found one in Dallas. But anyway, I've never had a record come out on vinyl in a long time, long time. And so that's thrilling for me. I actually had to go out and get a record player again. I haven't had a record player in my office in a long time.
Yeah, it came full circle for you. You were on both ends of the vinyl albums.
Yeah, in fact, I was back with the Imperials. We still had 8-track, man.
If you only could have kept all those vinyls from back then, you probably could have
Woo,
funded this entire album yourself.
my Lord, I tell you.
Is there more original music already in the works? Maybe once we get past this cycle, it's ready to go and get you back in the studio?
Well, yeah, I've been working on something. In fact, I started working on it before Cover Story, and I kind of put it on hold. But a lot of them are songs that me and some friends have written, and we got about, I don't know, half the way through, and then we just waited once we started Cover Story. And so after this, probably March, I will go back in the studio and start working on that record to hopefully have it out in the fall, maybe.
Awesome. People outside the music industry, something that they may not really look at is artist mental health in the industry is it's just brutal on it. And I feel like sometimes the Christian artists get it even worse because they feel like they can't express some of the emotions they feel. I've seen artists that come off stage and go look at their comments and they might have been judged for a picture from sound check of them wearing shorts and they'll end up in tears. But with you being so open about your struggles over these years, have some of these current artists came to you to kind of look for counseling through some of the stuff that is
Well,
that side of the industry?
sure, sure. I mean, an artist, we are temperamental, and I'm sure the same way in your world. You want people to like you, but you also want to be honest about what you're doing. And this day and time, I mean, people respond immediately, and it's like I did this. I told my story on Soft White Underbelly, which is not a Christian network. Mark Lata, who actually shot the cover of the new LP, but he asked me, and I don't think he's ever had any Christians on his show before. He has 5.5 million subscribers, and he heard a little bit of my story and asked me to tell it there. And he's not a Christian. He's not, and so it was just he and I in the room, just he and I. And his studio for years was down on Skid Row, and he tells the story and interviews these people that are destitute and really showing America this side of our society that none of us know. And so he asked me to tell my story, and I don't know. I was talking to him. I was witnessing to him. I was being honest about the pain and the struggle and the failure. And that has been viewed now over 500,000 times. And, the comments, maybe only 3,000 or less were from Christians. I'd say maybe a quarter of them were actually Christians. The rest of them are just people out there that the story moved them, and my relationship with Jesus moved them. And but that has just gathered a whole lot of attention. I was with my dentist, and I didn't know him very well at all, last week, and he said, I really enjoyed your interview on Soft White Underbelly. And I was like, a dentist, you watch Soft White Underbelly? And but anyway, that has also opened a lot of doors and brought attention to my struggle, my faith, and what Jesus can do in a life. But I don't know. God has just, these last several years, I guess the documentary was like 6 years ago. And it's interesting, Brandon, when you have someone that's in front of people, and we all try to put our best foot forward and never really talk about the pain and the struggle, and never show our heartbreak, because we've got to be Christian, and everything's positive, everything's up, and if you serve Jesus, your life is the most incredible thing there is. And but I believed that if somebody in a group would lift their hand and say, I messed up so bad, but the grace of God, and then other people may have courage. You know what I did too? Because the saddest thing is when people are hurting on the inside and afraid their secret will be found out, it holds them captive their whole life. And when I do concerts, I'll take about 12 minutes from the concert and tell the story of what I went through and the trauma and everything else, but how God brought me out. And it started about 6 months, I guess, after the documentary came out, that at the end of the night, I'd be down front or I'd be at the product table, and people would lean in and whisper their secret. And I could tell they had not said it out loud ever before. And I remember the first one, it was a woman. I don't know, she might have been 45. I can't tell ages anymore, but about 45, something like that. And she leaned in and very quietly whispered that I was molested by my uncle from 13 to 16. And he made me feel like it was my fault. And she had carried that shame and just carried it. And it's everything you can think of. But I discovered, if we are honest and real about our relationship with God and our struggles on this planet, and it takes pressure off other people to not have to live up to this expectation of what we think we're supposed to be. In fact, I want to jump back to I did an album, self-titled record in the 80s. I think it was 87, something like that. That was an album. It was a self-titled record. Russ Taff. But I hadn't been out of treatment that long, and I was still trying to find my way. I mean, I was just fighting to keep my marriage together and trying to keep a lid on what was going on. Because back then, if you told them you just got out of treatment, my Lord, So the record company really wanted me to make a record. Metals had just exploded, and it's time to make another record. But I couldn't do that record, a Metals 2. I wasn't there anymore. I mean, it was life and death. It was just life and death, and I couldn't write. My brain was still trying to get everything firing right again. And there's a guy at Word, he was A&R, and he brought a song by Michael Bean, and it was called I Still Believe. And through the pain, through the heartache, through the storms, through the cries, through the wars, cold and heat, I still believe. And I started crying and saying, if I could write a song right now, that's what it would be. Through all of this chaos in our lives, but I still believe in him. I still believe. And then it was followed up by songs of, Charlie Peacock's Down in the Lowlands and Hear My Cry, Save Me. And I wrote a song, he's begging Tori to stay with me. And so when the record came out, it was right in the middle of PTL. We're blessed, we're blessed, we're blessed. We are blessed. We don't deserve it, but yet we are blessed. And I come out with a record going, Down in the Lowlands, Hear My Cry, Save Me. God, I'm going under if you don't do that. And the record company did not know what to do with it. It was like, and I remember Tori asking me, she said, Russ, do you want to be this honest? Do you really want to be this honest? And I said, well, honey, where I'm at in my life right now, honesty is the only thing that's going to save me. Being honest with myself, being honest with my career, and being honest with the testimony that I've been given. And it took a long time for that record to take off. In fact, the listening party, the record company was kind of scratching their heads. They didn't know what to do with it. But I don't know. It's just something happens when somebody tells the truth. And said, man, my life, it's up and down and in and out, and I trip and fall, and then there's moments of glory, but the grace of God, the grace of God, the grace of God. And then all of a sudden, the world looks in at us and said, well, they're real people just like we are. Instead of holding up this banner that nobody can live up to, unless it's the pastor and a couple of deacons. But it seemed like everybody else is taking it a day at a time, and trying to do right. And taking 2 steps forward and a half a step back, then taking 4 steps forward and 2 steps back. But that's been my life. But I have encountered a Jesus that loves me. It changed my life, Brandon, when I was able to walk away from that old God that was not happy with me and not pleased with me, and I found a God that was with me when I was in that hotel room drinking, and that he walked with me and kept leading me and bringing people into my life. into my life. But that's part of my story, that's, and when you're honest and you talk about it, and then they see what God can do in a life. What a testimony, instead of standing up there saying, God does not like this people, God does not like that people, and you can come in and you can't come in. I mean, man, come on. We're all sinners saved by grace, all of us. But
Yeah.
don't get me started. Don't get me started.
Yeah.
But the thing about, you asked me about young artists coming to me, and I was there years ago, man. I wanted everybody to like me, and you're trying to build your career, and you're standing up there every night giving 130%. And if somebody says something negative, it just breaks your heart. I mean, I remember just being devastated. You could have, and the same with your show, Brandon, you can have 5,000 people saying you're incredible, the show ministered to them and everything else. Then there's two people that just rake you over the coals, and it just deflates you. But that's the good thing about getting older, is I don't care anymore. Either you'll listen to me or you won't. Either you'll come to my concerts or you won't. But I'm doing what I feel like I've been called to do, and I'm not trying to please everybody. And the songs and the words of my mouth and everything else is geared to people that are broken, like me.
Yeah.
And I've been sober a long, long time. I've been sober going on 20 years. But I still remember those times when I was lost and scared and afraid and numbing myself because I did not want to feel anything. And how you hate yourself. You just hate yourself. But then all of a sudden, Jesus comes walking into the middle of all that. And he says, Russ, I see you, and I see how scared you are, but I died to give you power to walk out of this. And so I tell my story, but then I get to talk about my Jesus, that Jesus that was there when I fell flat on my face, and that would lift me up. And when I was terrified people would find out my secret, I would sit alone and talk to him, just talk to him. And I would feel his encouragement and I would feel his love. But for so long, that religious voice that constantly told me how bad I was. But my Lord, man, when a miracle happens in your life, and I'm not perfect, Brandon, dear Lord of mercy, man, I'm still dealing with stuff but when you sing from this place now, everything is so intense. And your words are intense, your songs are intense, that just spread the story about Jesus, but people ask me, well, why are you still out there? Good Lord, you're 71 years old, and what are you doing? And it's, God has allowed me to keep my voice, but it's to tell the story. That's why I'm out here. And this record, I was blindsided by it. I wasn't out looking for this. I wasn't like shopping Nashville for things. I mean, they came to me and said, we still feel like God's got a lot to say through you and sing through you, and we want to help. And they funded this thing. And then Steve Taylor wanted to kickstart it. And man, we raised a whole lot of money. So I'm just standing back amazed, Brandon. I'm just standing back amazed. And I know your life, it's the same story. All of us that are honest and real, it's the same story about how God steps in and he helps us. He helps us. But anyway, I'm on a soapbox just preaching now. Sorry.
We're going to take a journey down this version of your story. January 31st cover story will be out there. Vinyl might be delayed a little bit though, right? If you've ordered vinyl, you might have to wait another week or so.
Yeah, I think it's gonna take a little bit. I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. But they're being pressed as we speak. So it may be after the release date, but they're coming.
Yeah,
they're coming.
Cover story. Gonna be streaming everywhere January 31st from Russ Taff. Give it a listen. Good hanging with you and chatting about your story again today, Russ.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you for your work for the kingdom, man. Thank you.